Hey everybody, Ross here, and this is Bible Study Superstar. If this is your first time on this channel, click here to go back to the intro, or if you prefer to see what's been going on recently, click here to go back to Genesis 15. Now, without further ado, I'm just going to jump right on into Genesis 16, verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "See now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Please, go in to my maid, perhaps I shall obtain children by her." And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. Then Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar her maid, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. So he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress became despised in her eyes. Then Sarai said to Abram, "My wrong be upon you. I gave my maid into your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between you and me." So Abram said to Sarai, "Indeed, your maid is in your hand. Do to her as you please." And when Sarai had dealt harshly with her, she fled from her presence. Now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, Sarai's maid, where have you come from, and where are you going?" She said, "I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai." The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress, and submit yourself under her hand." Then the angel of the Lord said to her, "I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude." And the angel of the Lord said to her, "Behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren." Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, "You are the God who sees." For she said, "Have I also here seen him who sees me?" Therefore the well was called Beer Lahai Roi. Observe, it is between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. Alright, at this point, Abram and Sarai had waited 10 years for the child God had promised them without seeing his fulfillment. There was no explanation as to why God was taking so long, but we can safely guess that God was waiting on his own perfect timing. Now, when Abram and Sarai agreed to use Hagar as a surrogate mother, there must have been some doubt that God would do what he said, how he said he would do it. Instead of waiting and believing in God's specific promise, they thought they would, quote, help God out. God doesn't need our help to do anything he chooses to do. This also reiterates how specific God is in his instructions, commands, and promises. God said that Abram would have children of his own loins, not someone else's, as Sarai suggested. So when Abram took Hagar, not only was he showing that he thought God wasn't capable of following through on his promise, but he committed adultery in order to, quote, help God out. Sending to, quote, help out a holy God sounds quite ludicrous when you think about it, doesn't it? Moving on. When Hagar conceived, she, very understandably in my opinion, began to despise her mistress. Now, why do I say that this is understandable? Once Hagar conceived, she likely thought that she deserved a much higher station than a mere maidservant, considering that she was giving birth to Abram's nation promised by God. Sarai obviously disagreed, as the agreement was that Hagar was to be the surrogate, not the actual mother. Now, when Sarai knew of Hagar's conception and how her maidservant now hated her, she blamed the entire ordeal on Abram, whenever it was originally her idea to begin with. Not only was Sarai upset that things were not going the way she intended, she was also probably jealous that Hagar was able to conceive where she couldn't. Had Abram and Sarai simply believed and continued to wait on God's timing, none of the people involved would have gone through the grief, pain, and heartache they were going through then. When it came down to it, in order to keep his wife happy and possibly out of guilt over his sin, Abram allowed Hagar to be treated so harshly that she saw no other option than to flee from her mistress. And finally, God promised that Hagar's descendants would be innumerable, but that her son would be a wild man, and he would be against everyone, and everyone would be against him. Hagar believed God's word, and I'm sure this promise greatly helped her to bear the abuse Sarai likely gave her when she came back. I also find it ironic that Hagar, an Egyptian and likely a pagan, believed in God's promise, called on his name, and obeyed his command, in this instance more than Abram, who was supposed to be the mighty man of God, which he is, but you get the point. And that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments, feedback, or suggestions, leave them below in a video response or in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all soon in Genesis 17.